Lady Honoria Vane arrived at the Caldwell Park autumn gathering on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday the county had already decided what it meant. Cecilia Caldwell heard the interpretations from 3 separate sources before breakfast. Her mother-in-law, who delivered the information with the particular care of someone who believes she is being kind, her solicitor's clerk, who mentioned it as a passing observation while reviewing the quarterly accounts, and her housekeeper, Mrs. Pettigrew, who said nothing at all but arranged the flowers in the entrance hall, with the specific deliberateness of a woman communicating something she considers too delicate to say directly. What all 3 were communicating, in their different registers, was this: Lady Honoria Vane was everything the county had been waiting for. She was 37, widowed 2 years longer than Cecilia, possessed of a viscount's title by her late husband, and most relevantly in the county's accounting, genuinely pleasant. Not performing pleasantness, actually pleasant. Cecilia had met her once, briefly, at a function in the spring, and had found her thoughtful and warm and entirely easy to like. This, she understood, was the problem. Cecilia was 33. She had been managing Caldwell Park alone for 18 months, with a competence that the county acknowledged privately and declined to emphasize publicly, because acknowledging it too directly would complicate the narrative they preferred, which was that she was doing admirably well for someone in her position, and would do even better once she had the right support beside her. The estate carried a question about the northern boundary that had been unresolved since her husband's death, a legal matter her solicitor had been working through with insufficient urgency. There were things at Caldwell Park that required her full attention, and were not, she noted, receiving it from anyone but herself. Edmund Reeve had been engaged to resolve the boundary question 3 weeks ago. He was a cartographer of considerable reputation, methodical, precise, with a knowledge of land survey law that her solicitor had described as unusually comprehensive. He had been working the northern fields every morning since his arrival, returning each afternoon with drawings and measurements and the specific quality of focused attention that Cecilia had come to associate with people who take problems seriously rather than managing the appearance of taking them seriously. He had been at Caldwell Park for 3 weeks when Lady Honoria Vane arrived for the autumn gathering. The gathering was her mother-in-law's arrangement, 12 guests, 4 days, the kind of event that Caldwell Park had hosted for 40 years, and that Cecilia had agreed to continue because refusing it would have required an explanation she did not wish to give. She had not anticipated that this particular gathering would be used as an occasion for something she had also not been consulted about. She was still considering how to feel about this when she encountered Edmund in the entrance hall on Wednesday morning, carrying his survey drawings toward the library where they worked through the boundary documents together each afternoon. He looked at her expression and said, "Lady Vane." "The county," she said, "has decided she is suitable." "For Caldwell Park?" "For the purpose of replacing me in it." He was quiet for a moment. "What does the county think of what you want?" It was, she thought, the right question. She was not yet certain of the answer. The gathering proceeded with the social precision her mother-in-law had always managed, and that Cecilia had learned in 18 months to appreciate as a skill, even when its deployment made her uncomfortable. Lady Honoria Vane was, as anticipated, excellent company. She spoke knowledgeably about estate management. Her own property in Wiltshire was, by all accounts, well run. She listened attentively when others spoke. She asked Cecilia at dinner on the second evening a genuinely intelligent question about the northern boundary dispute, which suggested she had either done research or paid attention to a conversation she had overheard, and either possibility reflected well on her. Cecilia answered the question directly. Lady Honoria listened, nodded and said, "That must have been considerable work to untangle." "It has been," Cecilia said. "Mr. Reeve has been invaluable." Something crossed Lady Honoria's expression. Not suspicion, not calculation. Something more like recognition, the look of a woman who has seen something clearly and is deciding whether to acknowledge it. She said nothing further on the subject and moved the conversation to the autumn plantings, which she discussed with genuine interest. Cecilia's mother-in-law, whose name was Mrs. Frances Caldwell, and who had lived at Caldwell Park for 31 years and loved it with the specific ferocity of someone who has never been entirely certain of her place in it, spoke to Cecilia privately the following morning. "She is everything that would be good for this house," Frances said, not unkindly, with the specific weight of someone delivering a verdict they believe to be correct and fair. "I know," Cecilia said, because she did. This was the difficulty. "The northern boundary," Frances continued, "the eastern field drainage, the roof on the west wing that has needed attention for 2 years. These are not small things, Cecilia. You have managed admirably. But managing alone and managing well are not always the same thing. The roof," Cecilia said, "has been assessed. The drainage plan is complete. The boundary will be resolved by the end of the month." She paused. "These things are being addressed by me and by the people I have engaged to help me address them." Frances was quiet for a moment. "I know," she said, which surprised Cecilia. "I know you are managing it. I am asking whether it is enough, whether you are enough alone." It was the most honest thing Frances had ever said to her. It was also, Cecilia thought, the wrong question. The right question was not whether she was enough alone. The right question was who she wanted beside her, and whether that person was available, and whether wanting them was something she was prepared to say out loud. She was not yet, but she was getting closer. The Northern Boundary Survey was completed on the Thursday of the gathering week, which Edmund had not planned, but which had happened because he had worked through the previous 2 evenings by lamplight in order to finish before the complication of 12 house guests made the library unavailable. He brought the final drawings to her in the morning room at 8:30, before the other guests had come down. She studied them for a long time without speaking. The boundary had been disputed for 11 years, since before she had come to Caldwell Park, since before her husband had understood it was a problem. Edmund had resolved it in 3 weeks through a combination of archival research, direct survey, and the particular legal knowledge that had made her solicitor describe him as unusually comprehensive. "This is completely clear," she said. "Yes. My solicitor has been working on this for 18 months. Your solicitor," Edmund said carefully, "was approaching it as a legal question. It was primarily a geographical one." She looked up from the drawings. He was standing near the window in the early morning light, and she had the specific thought, the kind that arrives without announcement and cannot be entirely dismissed once it has arrived, that she had been working beside this man for 3 weeks and had not once found herself managing the conversation. She had simply been having it. "Edmund," she said, and then stopped, because she had used his given name without deciding to, which had not happened with anyone in the 18 months since Robert died. He noticed. He did not remark on it. He waited. "What happens now?" she said. "With the commission." "The survey is complete," he said. "The legal documentation will take another week to prepare. After that," he paused, "after that the commission is concluded." She looked back at the drawings. Outside, the morning was bright and still, the northern fields visible from the window, the fields that were now unambiguously hers. 3 weeks of work that had resolved 11 years of uncertainty. She thought about what it would mean when he was gone. She thought about the roof assessment he had noticed without being asked, the drainage question he had mentioned to her solicitor directly, the way he had looked at Caldwell Park from the first day as though it were a problem worth solving well, rather than a commission worth completing adequately. She thought about Lady Honoria Vane, who was excellent and suitable and genuinely pleasant, and who was not Edmund Reeve. "I see," she said. At breakfast, Lady Honoria sat beside her and asked with genuine interest how the boundary survey had concluded. Cecilia told her. Lady Honoria listened carefully and said, "You must be enormously relieved." "I am," Cecilia said, "among other things." The gathering concluded on Friday afternoon. The guests departed in the correct order of social precedence, which placed Lady Honoria Vane's carriage third in the queue, which Cecilia suspected was not accidental. Lady Honoria said goodbye to her in the entrance hall with the warmth of someone who had, over 4 days, decided she liked Cecilia and was not going to pretend otherwise. She held Cecilia's hand briefly and said, "Coldwell Park is very fortunate in its present management." "Thank you," Cecilia said. "I mean it entirely." A pause. Small. Precise. "I think you know what you want. I think you have known for some time." She released her hand. "I hope it goes well." She left. Cecilia stood in the entrance hall for a long moment after her carriage had gone. The woman had known, had been gracious about it, had in fact been kind, the specific kindness of someone removing themselves from a situation with full awareness of what they are doing and choosing to do it cleanly. Cecilia found that she was, unexpectedly, grateful. Edmund was in the library with the legal documentation when she came in. He had his coat on. The commission was concluded, the drawings complete, the week of remaining paperwork, the last formal reason for his presence at Coldwell Park. She sat across from him at the library table. "I want to say something," she said, "and I want to say it clearly, because I have spent 18 months being careful, and I find I am tired of the particular kind of carefulness that prevents honest conversation." He set down the document he was holding. He waited. "Lady Honoria Vane is everything the county wanted for Coldwell Park," Cecilia said. "She is capable and titled and genuinely good. Any reasonable assessment of this situation would conclude that she was the appropriate choice." "Yes," he said. "I am not going to make the reasonable choice," she said. He looked at her. "I want to be clear about what I'm saying," she continued. "I am not asking you for anything. I am telling you what I have decided, which is that I am not going to pursue what the county has arranged, because I know what I want, and it is not what they have arranged. What I do with that knowledge is a separate question that can be addressed separately." He was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the last carriage had gone, and Coldwell Park had settled back into its own rhythms. The sounds of the house, the wind across the northern fields that were now legally and unambiguously hers. "Cecilia," he said. He had also used her given name without deciding to. "Edmund," she said. "The documentation will be complete by next Friday," he said. "I will be at Coldwell Park until then." "I know," she said. "After that," he said carefully, "I have no commission here." "No," she agreed. "You would need another reason to stay." He looked at her with the attention she had come to depend upon, the kind that did not require her to simplify what she was saying in order to be understood. "I'll finish the documentation," he said. "Good," she said, and left him to it. She went to find Frances. Frances was in the sitting room, with her embroidery, which she had been using as a displacement activity since Cecilia had known her. She looked up when Cecilia came in with the expression of a woman bracing for a conversation she has been expecting. "Lady Vane has gone," Cecilia said. "I saw." "I won't be following up the acquaintance in the way you intended," Cecilia said. Not unkindly, clearly. Frances set down her embroidery. "Cecilia, I know what you intended," Cecilia said. "I know it came from care for this house and for me. Both of those things are true, and I don't want to dismiss them." She paused. "But I have been managing Coldwell Park for 18 months, and I have been doing it well. And the question of who stands beside me in it is mine to answer. Not the county's, not yours. Mine. Frances was quiet for a long time. "The cartographer," she said finally. "He is still completing the commission," Cecilia said. "Nothing has been decided." "But you have decided something." "Yes," Cecilia said. "I have decided what I am not going to do." The week that followed was the quietest Cecilia could remember at Caldwell Park. The guests were gone, the house was its own again, and the particular stillness of a large property in late autumn, fires lit against the cold, early dark, the smell of wood smoke and old stone, settled over everything, with the specific comfort of a place becoming itself after a period of performance. She and Edmund worked in the library each afternoon as they had for the previous 3 weeks. The legal documentation was methodical work, cross-referencing survey results with historical records, preparing the formal statements that would close the boundary question permanently. It required precision and patience, and the willingness to sit quietly with complicated material for extended periods of time. She had not known before Edmund Reeve how much she valued that quality in another person. On Wednesday afternoon, the fire burned low, and neither of them noticed until the room had become genuinely cold. He noticed first and added wood without comment, which was the kind of practical attentiveness she had observed in him since the first week. The kind that addresses what is needed without requiring acknowledgement. "Frances spoke to me this morning," she said. He looked up from the document he was annotating. "She wanted to understand my intentions," Cecilia said, "which I found both intrusive and in context entirely reasonable." "What did you tell her?" "That I had not made any decisions that required communicating." She paused. "Which is true. I have made one decision. The rest are still open." He was quiet. The fire had caught properly now, the warmth beginning to restore itself to the room. Outside, the northern fields were visible in the low afternoon light. Mapped, documented, resolved. "Can I ask you something directly?" he said. "You generally do," she said. "Caldwell Park." He looked toward the window. "What does it mean to you? Not as a property, as a place." She considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "It means the 11 members of staff who have been here longer than I have, and whose continuation here depends on decisions I make," she said. "It means the tenants in the northern farms who needed the boundary resolved to know what they were working. It means the library, which was in chaos when Robert died, and which I have spent 18 months putting into order. It means the West Wing roof, which I know needs attention and which I will address in the spring. It means—" She stopped. "It means the specific satisfaction of understanding something well enough to take care of it properly." He looked at her. "That's not nothing." "No," she said. "It isn't. Lady Vane would have taken care of it," he said, "not as an argument, as an acknowledgement." "She would have," Cecilia agreed, "competently and well." She looked at him. "That isn't why I made the decision I made." He said nothing. The fire, the late light, the drawings on the table between them, the northern fields at last made legible and certain. "Friday," she said. "Friday," he agreed. On Thursday morning, Cecilia received 3 calls. The first was from Mrs. Alcott, a neighbour of 20 years' standing, who arrived at 11 with the expression of a woman on a mission she has assigned herself. She sat in the drawing room and spoke for 20 minutes about suitability, responsibility, and the particular obligations that attached themselves to the management of an estate of Caldwell Park's standing. She did not mention Edmund Reeve by name. She did not need to. The second call was from the Reverend Stanhope, who arrived at 12:30 and managed to communicate the same message in the language of pastoral concern rather than social obligation. He meant well. He also did not mention Edmund by name. The third call was from Frances, who arrived at 3, sat down across from Cecilia in the library, and said, "I owe you an apology." Cecilia looked at her. The gathering, Francis said. Honoria Vane. I arranged it without telling you what I was arranging. That was not respectful, and you deserve to be treated with more respect than I have been managing lately. Francis, I am frightened, Francis said, which was the second time in recent weeks she had used that word, and it landed differently each time. Robert is gone. You are not Robert. Caldwell Park is not the same house it was. I have been trying to hold it in the shape I knew, and that has required managing things that are not mine to manage. She paused. Including you. The room was very quiet. The cartographer, Francis said. I don't know him. I don't know what he is or what he wants. I know that he is not titled, and that the county has noticed him, and that this will not be simple. No, Cecilia said, it won't be. But you are going to do it anyway. I don't know yet what I am going to do, Cecilia said honestly. I know what I am not going to do. Everything else is still... She paused, being surveyed. Francis looked at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, something in her expression shifted. Not approval, not quite, but something that resembled the reluctant recognition of a woman who has been looking at something from the wrong angle and has just adjusted. He resolved the northern boundary in 3 weeks, Francis said. Yes, your solicitor had it for 18 months. Yes. Francis was quiet. Well, she said, that is something. It was not, Cecilia thought, a blessing, but it was a beginning. Edmund was in the library when Francis left. He had heard none of the conversation. He had been working in the survey room adjacent. He resolved the northern boundary in 3 weeks, Francis said. Yes, your solicitor had it for 18 months. Yes. Francis was quiet. Well, she said, that is something. It was not, Cecilia thought, a blessing, but it was a beginning. Edmund was in the library when Francis left. He had heard none of the conversation. He had been working in the survey room adjacent. But he came through as Cecilia was still sitting with the particular silence that follows a conversation that has cost something and returned something in roughly equal measure. 3 calls, she said. I counted the carriages, he said. The county has opinions. The county, he said, frequently does. He sat down across from her. Does it change anything? She looked at him, at the drawings on the table, at the northern fields, still visible in the last light. No, she said, it doesn't. The Caldwell Park estate dinner was held every autumn. A tradition of 30 years, 12 local families, the kind of gathering that ratified the social arrangements of the county for the season ahead. Francis had always organized it. This year, for the first time, Cecilia had organized it herself. She had invited Edmund. This was not strictly unconventional. He was a man of professional standing who had conducted significant work for the estate. The invitation list included her solicitor, her land agent, her surveyor of 10 years. Including Edmund was, by any formal accounting, appropriate. The county understood that it was also something else. He arrived at 7, correctly dressed with the composure of a man who has decided to be somewhere and is committed to that decision regardless of its reception. Cecilia received him in the entrance hall, which was her hall, in her house, and she introduced him to Mrs. Alcott, who had called the previous morning with her opinions, with the specific pleasantness of a woman who has decided that pleasantness, in this context, is the most effective available approach. Mr. Reeve completed the northern boundary survey, Cecilia said, which had been unresolved for 11 years. I thought it appropriate that he join us this evening. Mrs. Alcott said that this seemed entirely reasonable, which it was, and which was also not the complete picture, and which all 3 of them understood completely. Dinner proceeded. Edmund was placed by Cecilia's arrangement 3 seats from her, close enough to speak to, far enough to be appropriate. He spoke with her land agent about drainage, with her solicitor about boundary law, and with Mrs. Alcott about the history of the northern fields with a knowledge and engagement that visibly adjusted Mrs. Alcott's assessment of him over the course of 40 minutes. This, Cecilia had calculated, was the most effective available approach. After dinner in the drawing room, Frances came to stand beside her. "Mrs. Alcott," Frances said quietly, "has revised her opinion." "I noticed," Cecilia said, "the land agent is asking him about the eastern drainage." "Good," Cecilia said. "The eastern drainage needs addressing." Frances was quiet for a moment. "You planned this." "I invited him to dinner," Cecilia said. "He planned the rest by being himself in a room full of people who needed to understand who he was." Frances made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a concession, but contained elements of both. Later, when the guests had moved toward the entrance hall for their coats and carriages, Edmund came to stand beside Cecilia near the fireplace. The room was still full enough that the moment was technically public. He was aware of this. So was she. "The eastern drainage," he said. "Mr. Hadley mentioned it. At some length. It would require a proper survey before any plan could be proposed." A pause. "It would take approximately 6 weeks, depending on the ground conditions in winter." She looked at him. "That is a longer commission than the boundary survey." "It's a more complex problem," he said. "It is," she agreed. Around them, the room was conducting its own conversations, the gradual movements of departure, the particular social choreography of a gathering reaching its end. No one was paying them specific attention. Everyone was aware of them. "Cecilia," he said, quietly enough that it belonged only to her. "Edmund." "The Eastern Drainage Survey," he said. "When would you want it to begin?" She looked at him with the full knowledge of what they were actually discussing, and with the specific clarity of a woman who has spent 18 months making difficult decisions alone and has, finally, found someone she trusts to be part of the conversation. "January," she said, "when the house is quieter and the county has found something else to discuss." "January," he agreed. Across the room, Frances was watching. Her expression was not approval, not yet, but it was no longer opposition. It was something more honest than either. The look of a woman adjusting slowly to a version of Caldwell Park she had not anticipated, and was beginning with some effort to understand. Mrs. Alcott, departing with her coat and her revised opinion, paused at the door. "Lady Caldwell," she said, "exceptional dinner. And the boundary matter. Resolved, you say, permanently?" "Permanently," Cecilia said. "Remarkable." Mrs. Alcott looked briefly toward Edmund, who was speaking again with the land agent, and then back at Cecilia with the expression of a woman updating a ledger. "Well, he clearly knows his work." "He does," Cecilia said pleasantly. "Among other things. The following spring at Caldwell Park, the East Drainage Survey was completed in March. The plan was implemented in April, resolving a problem that had plagued the lower fields since before Cecilia's arrival at Caldwell Park. The west wing roof was addressed in February, ahead of schedule, because Edmund had noticed in December that the damage was more extensive than the original assessment had indicated, and had said so directly, which her solicitor had not done in 18 months of quarterly reviews. The county by spring had found other things to discuss. This was the reliable quality of county opinion. It moved on when the situation it had been discussing resolved itself in a way that removed the available drama. Frances had begun asking Edmund questions about the eastern fields at breakfast, which Cecilia took as the most reliable available indicator of progress. On an evening in late April, when the survey was filed, and the drainage running clean, and the northern boundary a matter of permanent record, Edmund had a conversation with Cecilia in the library that had nothing to do with maps or drainage, or the legal documentation of land. The conversation was, in Cecilia's estimation, the most precisely conducted she had ever participated in, which was, she thought, entirely in character. Her answer was yes. She had known it would be since January, possibly since before.